behind the scenes. Watch Brendan wrestle with a thing. A microphone. All right. In contempt of court? What? All right. Everybody grab your notebooks, Bibles, and such. So, for those of you who were here last week, we'll do a little bit of a recap so everybody can catch up. First off, I'd say open up to a new page, put today's date, put all that jazz. Yeah.
What is it?
Today's date is good question. It is the 27th, yes.
We're like halfway through the
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Don't ruin it. All right. So, what did we do last time? That, but what is that?
Talk.
We did talk. Yes. So what did we talk about, like, from the beginning? That was sort of towards the end.
We took apart some assumptions.
All right, we talked about assumptions, right? So the first thing we did was I sort of laid out the first few weeks of the study in terms of talking about how Revelation. Does anybody remember what the image I used was for Revelation? Like, Revelation is like it's like a regular field, which is past a minefield, right? So you want to go to the field because it's beautiful and lovely and wonderful and all that jazz. There's really cool things there, but most people don't go into the field because to get there you have to cross a minefield to get in. And then there's lots of ways that we as Christians can sort of interact with that minefield badly. A lot of people go in and they end up stepping on a mine because they think that there is no minefield, and then they blow up both of their legs, and then they end up saying like, hey, don't go there, it's full of mines, Revelation is scary, that sort of thing. But then other people, they'll walk in and they'll not hit any mines. They'll go in and it's wonderful, and they're like, hey, everybody read Revelation. It's perfect and wonderful and everything's great, which is also not really a responsible track to take because there's landmines, right? And there might not have been landmines for its original audience, but there are for us. So getting this book right can have incredible benefits for us as Christians. It can really open some things up for us in our spiritual life and our walk with Christ in terms of awareness, in terms of knowing what's going on in the world around us. But on the other hand, if we go into it and don't get this book right, if we misunderstand what's happening and what it's trying to say, it can have some really bad consequences, like ruining things for people. Really bad theologies have sprung up because of misreadings of Revelation. So last week, specifically, we went over assumptions. Does anybody what was your definition for assumptions from last week?
A thing that is accepted as true without proof.
Yeah, all right, so it's something that's accepted as true without proof, or it can be making a conclusion without any actual evidence. And I use the example of, like, in high school, I used to see people, and like based on the way that they dressed, I can make a lot of assumptions about that person. Like, they probably like this music, they probably do these hobbies, all that sort of stuff. They probably act this way. That's not necessarily true, but I was drawing that conclusion based on evidence, or without any evidence. So we talked about how it's dangerous to bring assumptions to the Bible, and especially Revelation, because what we end up doing is we assume things of it and we ask the text questions that it doesn't want to answer in the first place, right? And what's the problem with that? What's the problem with bringing questions that the text might not even want to answer? This is sort of what we focused on last week.
Brings about misguided understanding.
Yeah, well, you get misguided understanding, for sure. Also, I'm going to repeat everything you guys answer because you can't hear it on this. So yeah. That's why I'm repeating everything you say. What else? What's the problem with reading Revelation with an assumption in our heads? Or we sort of make it say stuff that it doesn't want to say, right? And we talked about some of the questions that people bring to Revelation. We talked about, like, how will the world end? When will the world end? What is heaven like? What is hell like? All those why are we here was one that Wade mentioned. And we're bringing those to Revelation, assuming that it's going to answer those questions. But it might not answer those questions. That might not be what Revelation wants to do. We have to take the Bible on its own terms. So we went over, we talked about how, like, we can't force an answer out of it. So we went over how a lot of people assume that this is what Revelation is, a chronological roadmap of the future. Can somebody sort of describe what that means?
I think it's like predicting the future in order of what happens in the world.
Yeah, exactly. It's we broke it down there. Like chronological would mean it's in order, it's in event to event. A roadmap is something that you see coming ahead of you. Like if I can read a roadmap and I see Burger King on the right, I will expect a Burger King to be on the right. And of the future means it is chronologically ahead of us, right? So this is sort of the assumption that people bring to it a lot, and we sort of broke that down a bit by talking how, does anybody remember how many times the world ends or how many times Judgment Day happens in Revelation? At least 7, depending on whose count you use. It ends at least 7 times. How many times does the world end before Jesus is born in Revelation? This is a deep cut.
Before Jesus?
Yeah, remember we talked about how there's that sort of retelling of the nativity narrative with Mary's like the star woman and there's a dragon. How many times does the world end before that? You remember?
I'm going to say 14.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Hello.
14.
It only ends 7 times though, so it can't. It's 14 before it ends twice before he was born. So Jesus is semi, and the world ends twice before that. So that sort of breaks down this idea that it's a chronological roadmap of the future. So, since as we can tell by the fact that we exist, the world was definitely not destroyed twice before Jesus was born, we can sort of assume that Revelation is not a chronological roadmap of the future. And we sort of summed it up by saying that Revelation doesn't predict, but it always reveals. It doesn't predict, but it always reveals, which is right in the name, Revelation, right? So we talked about assumptions. We talked about asking wrong questions of Scripture. So here is the follow-up question. How do we ask the right questions? Like, how do we find what the right questions to ask are? Also, Beatty, do you mind seeing if that's working right? So how do we find out? If we're looking at a book of the Bible and we're trying to figure out what questions should I be asking of this text, how do we find out that answer?
Good job.
Now let's.
Asking questions until you get the right one?
Yeah, but how do you know it's the right one?
When you get the right answer?
Yeah, but how do you know it's the right answer?
I don't know, just keep trying.
Exactly. So like you can sort of keep shooting it out like a shotgun, but like how do you know when it's right?
You hear a thunk and you hit it.
You hear a thunk. So you hear thunks when you ask questions to the Bible?
Now we're talking about the shotgun.
So say I send you an article online. How do you know what questions you need to ask of that article?
You read the article.
Oh, you read it. Yeah, that's a good first step. Then what?
Find what confuses you.
Find what confuses you, yeah. Do you happen to look at what website the article is on? You should, because that's basic media literacy. This is how fake news gets spread when people don't look at the source of things, right? So if it's from a reputable source and it's a news article, you'll treat it one way. But if it's a parody article, you'll treat it another way. Like if it's have any of you read something from The Onion or heard of The Onion? It's like a parody. It's a news parody website. It's satire. So they'll say things that sound like they might be true, but it's an exaggeration. Or it's not true at all. But if you know that it's from The Onion, you're probably not going to take it as serious news, right? So that's what we call genre, right? What does genre mean? Does anybody know? Have you heard that word? Hands up if you've heard that word. All right, everybody's heard that word. What is a genre?
Like a category.
A category? What's another way to say that? a headline that you might come across up on the board here. And then what I want you to do is I want you to ask what questions make sense to ask of this headline. If you can read it. All right, it says Tigers massacre Indians. That's a headline you find, right? What questions do you ask to make sense of this headline? How many Indians? How many tigers? What else?
Are we talking like literal tigers killing Indians?
That's a good question to ask. Is this something I'm just not understanding right now? Oh, that's the point. What questions should you ask? How did it happen? What? Why?
Why is it considered a massacre?
Okay, why is it a massacre? All right, so I think the first question to ask of this, like if you see this as a headline online, is what website? What website are you on? Because this could mean many, many, many different things, right? What would this headline mean if you were on ESPN? ESPN is a sports station.
Oh, it'd be like sports teams.
All right, so it's who's the Tigers? It's baseball. Detroit Tigers massacre the Cleveland Indians, right? So this could be a report on a sports game. This could be a baseball report, right? So what would this headline mean if you were on the Greenville News website? All right, tigers broke out of the zoo and killed, politically incorrect way of saying Native Americans. Or it could be people from India, because in Greenville there's a lot of people from India. What could this mean if you were on an international news site like AP or something like that? Probably something that happened in India, right? This is like Indians has multiple meanings. So it could be Native Americans in Greenville, or it could be tigers in India, because that's where tigers are native. Like there might just be a massive pack of tigers massacring people, right? So if that phrase means different things based on what website it's on or where you're seeing it, what questions come from that? Like what questions would you ask of this if you saw this headline on a sports website? What was the score? What else? Does this have playoff implications? Like, why is this a big deal? Why are they calling it a massacre? Was it like a no-hitter? Like, was it a walk-off game? Like, what happened that qualifies this as a massacre? What questions would you ask? Or sorry, if it was the same headline though, and you're in the international section, as Michael said, you would not be asking what was the score, right? If you're reading about a massacre of people in India by tigers, you're not going to ask what was the score. You're probably going to be asking how many people were. Kansas City is also a nationally known zoo. So you would not be asking the question how many people died and did the tiger get shot if this was the sports section, because that would be a very intense baseball game, right? So the question that you ask depends on where your source is. Again, genre guides our questions. You guys all write that down? Genre guides our questions. But the good news is you are all experts on genre. You use it every single day in one way or another, whether you're aware of it or you're not. So if you are trying to figure out what the weather is, what app do you use? The weather app. Okay, that is the genre of app that you're using, is the weather app. If you are trying to watch a fictional TV show, what app do you use? Or what apps could you use? Netflix? Amazon Prime? Hulu? Crunchyroll? Well, like whatever it is, if you want to watch a fictional show, you know where to go. If you want to learn something non-fictional, what app do you use? Google? Safari, your browser, whatever it is, like, and then from there you go to subgenres of information, right? You know where to go in order to find the kind of information that you're looking for, because you know the genre of things that you're looking for. You wouldn't go on Netflix and be like, what's the weather today? Because that's Netflix. You wouldn't ask that, right? So genre, again, guides our questions. Write this one down for sure. Genre guides our questions. And my notes are upside down. Guides our interpretation. Here's another example I just thought of. Is anybody here really bad at detecting sarcasm? I know sometimes Gregory is. If Luke was here, I would point him out, because there was that one time the first week that we were here, and I said, "You're driving me crazy," and he just went, "Sorry," and then like I was joking, that sort of thing. So if you know the genre of communication, if you know that you're joking with each other, you're probably going to understand sarcasm more than you would if you were just talking to somebody. So if genre guides our questions and genre guides our interpretations, does anybody know what genre Revelation is?
Interpretation of Revelation.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
An interpretation of Revelation.
So Revelation is an interpretation of Revelation?
I'm trying to remember what you said.
Yeah, what genre is Revelation?
Is there like a prophecy or I don't know, they could be considered like
Okay, some of it might be a prophecy or prediction.
Like some people might categorize it as like horror.
Okay, horror, maybe. So within the genres that we find in the Bible, does anybody know what genres it is? Because it's not fiction,
Letter.
so it can't really be horror. What was that?
Letter.
Okay, it's a letter. Any other ideas?
doesn't it have its own category? Because I wonder, like all the books are separated out into different.
Yes and no?
I can't remember.
All right, so it's kind of a trick question because Revelation actually has 3 genres. Revelation is a kind of a unique book within the Bible because it has 3 genres. And the first of those genres is an epistle. Anybody ever seen that word? Write this down for sure. This is like a new category for you. What's an epistle? If you ever flip through your Bible and you see like most of the New Testament and it says an epistle of,
It's like a letter to
it's a letter, right? An epistle is a letter. Another way to say this is, and this is just fun to say, the epistolary genre, which is fun times. So, how do we know that Revelation is a letter?